bang, flash of light, and a cloud of smoke when ignited. It's a little magic box that works as well for Aladdin as for an enormodome metal gig. Poof! The Wicked Witch would appear. I remember seeing Alice Cooper doing a great gag on his Welcome to My Nightmare tour. At the start of the show, Alice was running around in a film that was being projected on a white screen at the back of the stage. Suddenly, bang! Alice burst through the screen, and there he was, on the stage. I love stuff like that because it's all part of the illusion, the escapism you are after when you go to a metal and rock show. Stage sets and lighting and costumes are all added dimensions to help you get away from the crap of what can be boring everyday life for just one night. Obviously, like everything else I've talked about, when your band is first starting out, you have nothing at all. If you're lucky, you might be able to scrape together enough cash for a backdrop with the band's logo or the title of your latest album on it. For a metal band, the next stop is probably a bit of pyro for that wow factor. You can't beat a nice explosion to back up a guitar solo. But pyro is not just a metal thing. I've seen Lady Gaga using loads, and Cher and Madonna. Even country artists go big on the flames nowadays. Of course, fire can be dangerous, kids. I remember one pre-show in America where someone threw a cherry bomb on stage and it blew up in Dave Holland's bass drum. That was nearly a Spinal Tap moment. Drummer spontaneously combusts during show. The first visual accessory, the first gag we introduced to priest gigs, was the motorbike, of course. It was a pure on-the-spot whim of mine to ride a Harley on stage in Derby in 1979. The crowd loved it, so did I, and now it's a centerpiece of any priest show. I'll never tire of doing it. For years, metal bands always performed in front of banks of amps and speakers. It just seemed like how things had to be. Fans loved to see a guitarist soloing and headbanging in front of a mountain of speakers. Well, that's great, but there's so much more that you can do. The first time Priest had the dosh to put on a proper big production of a stage show was probably the Metal Conqueror Tour in 1984 to promote Defenders of the Faith. We gave the tour that name because in the center of the stage we had a recreation of the giant metal head from the album sleeve. It was my idea to try to recreate the album artwork like that, and it looked bloody great. At the start of every show, I'd emerge from the mouth of the metal monster, the Metallion, surrounded by flames, then walk along its arm towards the crowd, singing Love Bites. It was brill, but not everybody in the band was so enamored of it. The Metallion was so big that we had no room on stage for Dave Holland's drum kit, so we had to put Dave and his kit on the creature's head, 50 feet in the air. He bloody hated it. Dave first became aware of our daring concept at the full production rehearsal. "Well, where am I going to be?" he asked as he surveyed the stage set. "You're up there," I said, pointing up in the air. "Up there? I ain't fucking going up there." He had no choice in the matter, so before every show, he'd be making his way up the ladder at the back of the Metallion, grumbling away to himself. "You all right, Dave?" I'd call over. "No, I'm bloody not." Poor drummers, eh? They always get it in the neck. We were one of the first metal bands to take stage sets as far out as that. I suppose you have to be careful not to go too far and tumble into self-parody. But ultimately, if some people sneer, so fucking what? I don't care. I'm far more concerned with giving our fans a great show. Priest upped the ante again when we did the Fuel for Life tour after we released Turbo. This time, it wasn't just a monster's bonce. We had a whole giant robot at the back of the stage, seizing and lifting up me, Ken and Glenn at various points of the show. It was a massive contraption and it took a lot of carting around. Bands used to brag in those days about how many buses and trucks they took on tour. We had about 6 buses and 15 trucks on that jaunt. Well, great, but it means that our overhead expenses were stupidly high. We ended up between ourselves calling that jaunt the arm and a leg tour because we didn't make a penny profit. We sold out every show, but spent the lot lugging our ginormous stage production from arena to arena. Well, at least the robot looked cool. We tried something different on the Painkiller tour, with a set that had loads of levels and runways and skyscrapers of speakers towering over everything. Intentionally, the whole stage resembled the inside of one gargantuan set of speakers. Our message was simple: volume, noise. That set nearly finished me off, mind you. One night I was yowling away and a piece of the lighting rig snapped and came swinging down. I felt a rush of air on the back of my neck as a gigantic girder covered in lights missed me by inches. That could have been curtains for me. Special tours deserve special sets. When it came time to plot Priest's 50 Heavy Metal Years anniversary tour, we knew we wanted to pull out all the stops. Not many metal or rock bands survive for 50 years, and it is a landmark worth celebrating in style. Our planning always starts with me sending my ideas to our production manager, Martin Walker, who gets the ball rolling. I love being involved in the creative side of stage design, and Martin has the logistical and economic know-how to understand what will work and what won't. The 50th anniversary tour acknowledged where and what Judas Priest came from half a century ago. So the set is all machinery and chimneys, like the inside of a backcountry factory. That's ace, but I knew that I wanted a couple of visual spectaculars as well. Fans always remember the opening sequence of a show more than anything else. We wanted to present something visually spectacular, so I got on Snapchat in my bedroom and gave myself a Viking filter to help and inspire myself, and I wrote a speech. In the beginning, all earth languished in cold, empty darkness, a vast, silent void waiting to be brought to life. Far, far away, out in the deepest depths of the universe, a flame ignited, heralding forth a light and sound so immense it shook the very foundations of this world. I knew the fans would need something to gawp at while they listened to these words, so we commissioned an absolutely massive version of the Priest metal pitchfork symbol to tower above the stage. And then I had my light bulb moment of inspiration: the giant inflatable bull. Birmingham has always been famous for its bull ring. In medieval times, it was a setting for cruel animal-baiting sports. Nowadays, it's a massive shopping centre. So we asked a Dutch design company to make us a huge inflatable bull that would blow everybody away. I told them, we need to have the wow factor. We don't want a poxy thing like Spinal Tap's 18-inch Stonehenge. And they rose to the challenge. They made us a gobsmacking 20-foot bull that inflates to its full jaw-dropping size in just 10 seconds. And it cost us £80,000. You know, I'm funny like that. I hate paying over the odds for after-show band nice meals, but when it comes to spending money on our shows, I never bat an eyelid. It's dosh well spent. Anyone who saw our giant bull inflate on Priest's 50th anniversary tour will never forget it. When you present something like that to your fans, it makes them feel even prouder to be attached to you and to have been attached to you for years, 50 years in some instances. They've supported us for so long, and it's their reward. We're saying thank you. Priest have had some amazing stage sets over the years, and I'm proud of them all. There's still one thing left that I'd like to do, though. One box to tick. I'd like to fly. I had an idea of my entrance on the anniversary tour via the roof of the stage. We didn't do it in the end, not this time, but I still hope to go swooping over the crowd's heads one day. Yes, I will don my mad wings. It just feels like my destiny. Set lists. On our 50 Heavy Metal Years tour, Priest decided to play the first single we ever released, Rock-a-Roller, back in 1974. Now heard through 2022 ears, it's quite an unusual song that could easily sound very dated now, so it wasn't a decision that we took lightly. Glenn wrote the lyrics to it, which tell the story of a mean metal mother who takes no messing, all in wrestling is one of her pride and joys. She is a barroom fighter, 10-pint-a-nighter. It's a curious tale, and it's fair to say that Glenn had the strongest misgivings about disentering it. What about Rock-a-Roller? I asked in the pre-tour rehearsals as we put the set list together in Glenn's studio. No, said Glenn, just no. But we had a trick up our sleeve. We changed the texture of the song, up the tempo, made the guitars and drums heavier, and suddenly it sounded great and contemporary. It was as much of a thrill for us to play on tour as it was for our longest standing fans to hear it again. Set lists are absolutely critical to any metal or rock gig. They can make or break the show. They have to strike a balance and be very carefully thought out to hit the right dynamics, tempo, content, moods and emotions. There is a real science behind getting it right. You have to include certain songs in the set. They are your lifeline to your fans. If someone comes to see Priest and doesn't hear Breaking the Law, Hellbent for Leather, Living After Midnight or Victim of Changes, they feel cheated. We call those songs our chestnuts. They have to go in. I've heard of bands who get bored of their chestnuts and stop doing them. They announce in interviews, we're sick and tired of playing these songs and we're not playing them again. Well, fair enough, but that's not Priest's way, because we've never got bored of playing them. The dynamics of a set list are vital. At the start of a show, everyone has their eyes and ears locked on the band. So you have to start full on and smack them around the head. Bang, bang, bang. The opening 3 or 4 songs need to be full on energy and adrenaline. It's a manic metal attack, so we have to think about guitar changes. We don't want the momentum of that opening blast to be disrupted by us having to wait while Richie takes off one guitar and straps on another. Richie helps me compile the set list to ensure that doesn't happen. Once the set is well underway, we can put in the occasional ballad and tracks where the tempo is a bit slower. That's also the place for our epic, longer songs that are 6 or 7 minutes long. We'd never open or close the set with one of those. On the 50 Heavy Metal Years tour especially, we try to include songs from all points in our history. I've said before, our gigs are like a time machine for our fans. They might hear a track from 1978 or 1982 and be transported right back to their school days or a specific moment in time. I first heard Eleanor Rigby on a family holiday in Devon when I was 15. Even today, when I hear that Beatles classic, I'm back in my bunk in a 4-berth caravan. Musical memory is a powerful thing. Priest generally do 90-minute sets, and that feels right to me. Any longer might be too long. I'll take quality over quantity every time. You get some bands playing 3-hour sets. I hear the Grateful Dead used to do 6 hours. Well, try bloody doing that night after night for a year. Most of our chestnuts come at the end of the set and in the encore. There are good reasons for this. The front end of our set is very tight and full of skilled musicianship, and when we're worn out at the end of the night, it's nice to throw ourselves into those old favourites. It's also great to finish the set with a big sing-along with the fans, which, let's face it, ain't going to happen with Painkiller. That's why we generally close with Living After Midnight. Everybody can belt that one out, and it's a great celebration to end on. We all contribute to the set list. I'll ask everyone to send me a list of songs, then I put it all together. I sit in my kitchen, write a set list, put it on the wall and stare at it. I can hear the whole set in my head, how it starts, how it ends, and the connection between all the songs. Obviously, priests have to agree on what we're going to play, and there are certain songs that some band members are more attached to than others. This can lead to droll conversations in pre-tour rehearsals. Oh no, not that one. We can't do that one. Why not? I don't like it. Well, we recorded it. So what? I don't like it. Hey, what's the bloody point in recording it then? Positioning new tracks and deep cuts in the set is a balancing act. There is a cliche that when a band says, "Now here's a new song," half the crowd vanishes for a pint or a piss. But priests are lucky in that respect. Our fans are loyal and they tend to stick around and listen. Having said that, we did do a couple of tours back in the day when our new album was only just out, or even not quite out yet. We played 3 or 4 new songs that fans had never heard before, and it led to a bit of a dead spot in the show. That's a thing to avoid. Some fans love it when we play obscurities, old album tracks or songs we've not done in years. Richie plays the first chord of Bloodstone, say, and cheers go up here and there in the crowd. I long ago accepted that we have fans who know a lot more about our music than we do. We will keep a set list intact for a whole tour and just occasionally slip in an extra song or move a couple of them around. It helps keep us on our toes and stops us from slipping into a rut, and it also introduces an element of surprise for the fans on that night. Some of them don't want to be surprised, mind you. Before the show, they'll have memorized the set from the website Setlist FM, and that is what they want to hear. If we vary it, I normally get a few grumbles on my social media afterwards. Dude, you played Exciter in Detroit and Cleveland, but you didn't do it for us in LA. What the fuck? Well, that's showbiz. You can't please all of the people all of the time. Ultimately, priests play gigs for our fans, and we always want them to go away happy at the end of the night. But when it comes to set lists, we don't just give them what they want, we give them what they need. Guest lists. There is a scene that is as old as rock and roll itself that I can absolutely guarantee will happen a few times outside every single show that priests play. A security gorilla will be standing in front of the venue in a high-vis jacket, holding our guest list. A fan will run up and give him his name. "I'm on the guest list +1, he'll say excitedly. "Rob, Glenn, Richie, Ian, Scott, Andy, put me on." Mark as applicable, guilty. The security guy will examine the list, purse his lips, and shake his head. "Sorry, son," he'll tell him, "your name's not on, and if you're not on the list, you're not coming in." It's not that priests are particularly mean on handing out guest passes. Far from it. It just happens to every band. Guest lists are both a great opportunity for metal and rock bands to welcome friends, family and loved ones to their shows, and the absolute bane of their bloody lives. At any gig, the promoter will generally give every band member about 20 complimentary tickets or comps. The band manager will also get some, as will the record company, to share among its executives and the media. The numbers soon add up. It's more of an issue in some places than others. At big shows like New York, London, or Los Angeles, everybody seems to ask for comps. The guest list will stretch into the high hundreds. It can feel like there are more people pouncing around backstage than there are at the crowd. Everybody loves being on a guest list. You feel special, privileged, and, well, you get in for nothing. People get very excited about being on the list, but if for any reason they've been left off, they can get equally disappointed. Sometimes they lose their minds about it. I must admit, I'm to blame for a lot of priests' guest list disappointments because I have a very bad habit. Thomas, my partner, who also doubles as my PA when we're out on tour, goes spare at me about it. I've tried to mend my ways, but, well, I just can't help myself. I will be doing a load of Zoom interviews with journalists to promote a show. The interviewer will comment that he loves Priest and has been into us forever, and I always say the same thing. Oh, that's great. Tell you what, come down and see the show. I'll put you on the guest list and give you backstage passes. Really? Wow, thanks, Rob, the journalist will say. The problem is that the second the interview ends and the screen goes blank, I forget that I've said it. I don't tell Thomas, and the poor guy fetches up at the venue only to get turned away by the gorilla in the high-vis jacket. If Thomas and I go out for a quiet pizza in Chicago, say, the night before a gig, there will always be Priest fans who spot me and come over for a chat and a selfie. We'd love to see you play tomorrow, they'll say. And Big Mouth strikes again. Yeah, come on down, I'll put you on the list. The fans will be beside themselves with excitement. Thomas will look daggers at me because our list is already full, but he'll give them his email address and manage to squeeze them in. That's all lovely, but the problems start the next time we come to Chicago. These same fans will have held on to Thomas's email, and in the weeks leading up to the show, his inbox will light up. Hey, you know how you got us into the pre-show last time? We'd like to come again with a load of friends. Can we have 6 tickets and backstage passes, please? If we say yes, the demands get more and more outlandish. Great, and I see you're playing Nashville. My cousin lives there and is a big metal fan. Can you come down with 4 friends? Oh, and I've got an old high school buddy in Detroit who needs tickets for that show. It's an extraordinary process. A lot of fans are respectful when they get in touch again, but others email Thomas wanting the moon on a stick. Yeah, can you give us VIP passes this time? If he says no, they get well pissed off and tell him they're going to ask me to give him the sack. Because we've given these guys, whom we might only have met once in our lives, tickets for a previous show, they think they can have them forever. They assume the band gets countless tickets for free and can dish them out. But it doesn't work like that. Nothing comes for free. Somebody has to eat the cost, whether it's the band or the promoter. Priests have to pay for any extra guest tickets. If they cost $50 each and somebody emails requesting 5 freebies, they are basically asking us to give them $250. I'm surprised poor Thomas isn't as bald as me, because he'll be pulling his hair out trying to deal with these entitled guys. Sometimes he will call in Jane Andrews for support because, like all great band managers, Jane is very good at saying no. I think the ultimate example of guest list freeloaders came deep in the Midwest on one recent tour. We have an ex-military friend there, and when he asked if he could come down and bring his family, we said yes. We didn't expect that to mean 12 members of his family. I was in the dressing room before the show when Thomas appeared and said, "You have to see this, follow me." I did. Somehow, our ex-military guy and his extended family had blagged into artist catering and were demolishing our pre-gig food like pigs at the trough. Honey, this cooking is so much better than yours, our friend's father was saying, saliva drooling down his chin. Yep, it sure is, his wife agreed, gnawing on a chicken bone. It was funny, and it made us laugh at the time, but it also made one decision pretty easy for us. The next time we play that particular Midwest town, that hungry family will be hearing those dreaded words from the guy in the high-vis jacket. You're not on the list, and you're not coming in. Tour buses. When a metal or rock band graduates from a battered transit or even a glorified bread van to a proper slick tour bus, it is truly an upgrade of biblical proportions. In fact, you'll feel as if you've died and gone to a heaven on wheels. It's all about personal space. When you're piled on top of each other in a transit van, you have none. In Priest's first days, I used to try to bagsy the front passenger seat next to the driver. You get your own little cocoon of space. It wasn't much, but it was something. For British tours, we had a couple of years where we gratefully exited the transit and the band drove to gigs in a car while the road crew took our gear separately. We started off in a Ford Granada and then upgraded to an orange Volvo. We were in the Granada one cold, dark, midwinter evening in about 1975. We were on our way to a show somewhere up north and Glenn was driving through a near blizzard of heavy snow. I seem to remember we were on the A1M when we hit the black ice. It all happened very quickly and in slow motion. I was sitting in the back of the car. Glenn had us going at quite a lick, and I sensed the danger even before the back end started to go and we went into a full 360-degree spin. Shit, this is not going to end well. My life flashed before me as the whole band yelled out in fear and panic. We smashed hard into the motorway's central barrier, slid back across 3 lanes of tarmac, and came to a halt. We appeared to be all still alive, and we scrambled out to survey the damage. It could have been worse, but steam was hissing out from under the Granada's buckled bonnet. It was clearly going absolutely nowhere else that evening. Shit, what to do? This was long before mobile phones. We all stared at each other. Then a vehicle slowly appeared over the snowy horizon and pulled up next to us. A grinning, wizened face peered out from under a peaked cap. You lads had a bit of bother. You all right, are you? It was a farmer in a knackered old Land Rover. The old chap was also a saint. He towed our Granada to the hard shoulder, piled us into his stinky farm vehicle, and drove us to the venue. Heavy metal warriors, we felt more like the bloody Wurzels. The Wurzels were a 70s British novelty band who recorded joke versions of pop hits in country bumpkin accents. They were never really going to break in America. In America, by then, we had been upgraded to our first proper tour bus with bunk beds. It felt like luxury, absolute fucking bliss. Oh my God, I thought, where have you been for all of my life? This is the way to live. Thinking back, our first American tour buses weren't really all that. They were basically old Greyhound buses with the seats ripped out and bunk beds and a few facilities added. They were pretty bare bones, even rickety, but to us, they felt like mobile palaces. Sophisticated, top-of-the-range tour buses can cost millions of dollars nowadays. Our primitive early models were nothing like that, but even today, the layout largely remains the same. It's basically this. At the front, the driver is cocooned away, protected from any mayhem that might unfold behind him. Next is the lounge area with couches, sofas, a fridge, and a microwave. Nowadays, there'll be a big screen TV. Back in the 80s, we were plugged into Sony Walkmans. Next up on the bus are the bathrooms with toilets and a shower. In the center section are the bunks that are normally 4 or 6 on each side of the bus. At the back, there will usually be a second socializing area, maybe with books and games. I am describing the band bus here, of course. The road cruise bus will have one small social area at most, and up to 12 bunks crammed on each side of the aisle. Not for nothing is it nicknamed the sleigh bus. When we graduated to tour buses, for me, the key factor was the bunks. Your bunk was only just big enough to fit in, and it could feel like lying in a coffin, but you could squeeze in, put the light on, pull the curtain, and relax. It gave you some privacy, a place for a tiny bit of me time. Once we were settled in, we'd be on the tour bus for many weeks and months. We would all live, breathe, eat, drink, pee, and party together. But there is one golden rule, as true today as it was then. You never shit on the tour bus. The reasons are obvious, really. Buses are confined spaces, and with 6 or 7 sweaty, belching, hairy-arsed blokes cooped up on them, they can get rancid. You don't want to spend the morning speeding down a US freeway with your nostrils full of the drummer's breakfast dump. The etiquette is that if you need a crap on a tour bus, you have a word with the driver. He'll pull over at a truck stop, or if it's the middle of the night and you're desperate, by the side of the road, so you can run and drop one behind a tree. Ah, the glamour of touring. In theory, the tour bus is a vehicle to get you from A to B, to transport you between your various places of work. In practice, in the early years of Priest, this function was eclipsed by a far more pressing concern: full-on, raging heavy metal partying. We would all pile off the stage and back onto the bus, high on adrenaline and the buzz of the show, and the madness would begin. Drink, drugs, groupies, and scores of people running around screaming and going mental, me included. Random strangers everywhere. It would go on all night. Sometimes we'd be driving to a club or to a hotel or overnight to the next show. Sometimes we'd be static in the gig parking lot with female fans lining up to introduce themselves to the band. The tour bus would be a mobile Sodom, well, none of that sadly, and Gomorrah. Like most young metal or rock bands, we went to town. We filled our boots. Groupies would stay overnight on the bus with some of the lads. There'd be drug-fueled mini orgies. The police would pull us over and come on with sniffer dogs. You name it, we did it. It sounds great, right? Well, some nights it was. You're a young British bloke in a band in America, and you're living the life. You're the all-drinking, drugging, hard-partying rock star that you dreamt of being. Whoa. We had some amazing tour bus nights that I'll never forget. Well, except the ones where I was so pissed that I'd forgotten them by the next morning. But you can only live that life for so long. The party always ends, and the morning always comes. As you get older, you get tired of waking up with a killer hangover on a trashed tour bus, feeling as shit and grumpy as the bandmates scattered around you. As I've said more than once in this book, it's a young man's game. You grow tired of the aftermath of the parties, and the hangovers and the pissed off mornings accelerate the tensions that inevitably build up as you spend months living on top of each other. It creeps up on you. You hardly notice the mood changing. You start a tour full of excitement and enthusiasm. Then a few months in, you'll be lying in your bunk at 3 a.m. listening to a stupid pissed argument or people having drunken sex above you, and you'll find yourself thinking, fuck, I've had enough of this. Bad feelings can incubate on a tour bus. There'd be nights when Glenn and Ken would have a full-on row in the lounge. One of them would storm off to the back of the bus and they wouldn't talk for days. You'd feel like you could cut the air with a knife. I just couldn't sleep on the bus. There'd always be noise, whether it was all-night parties or someone bloody snoring their head off. With my lifelong chronic insomnia, I had no chance of nodding off. Eventually, I realized there was only one solution. I needed my own tour bus. It wasn't me catching LSD or lead singer disease, more on this element later. The rest of the band understood. If I was arriving at a venue low and knackered from no sleep, it did not equal a great Judas Priest show. I began renting my own bus, and my on-the-road life improved no end. I kept my bus immaculate as well. The tour buses are like hotel rooms. If you trash them, you pay. On my tour bus, you'd normally find me in my marigolds, sleeves up, scrubbing the sink or cleaning out the fridge. I turned into a heavy metal housewife on wheels. Nowadays, though, I hardly ever get on a tour bus, whether it's the band's or my own solo vehicle, because Priest always tour by private jet. It sounds swanky, and it's true that private jets cost a fucking fortune, and yet both economically and practically it makes sense. I'm not in my 20s and able to go all night without sleep anymore. I'm an old guy in my 70s and I need looking after. We have to face the facts that none of Priest are spring chickens. If we're to put on a good show for the fans, we need our TLC. I think it's no different to a football team or an NBA basketball squad. They travel by jet so they can arrive fresh to the game. Without, I hope, sounding like a spoiled rock star, it's still exhausting. Some nights we fly out straight after the show, cross various time zones, and arrive at a hotel in the early hours. If it's 4 a.m., this must be Chicago. My poor old body takes a right battering. Ultimately, it's worth
Takes
it.
a long
Judas
time.
Priest wouldn't be able to do huge tours nowadays if we were still spending 8 hours a day inching through traffic on tour buses. Now that the travel is less grueling, the promoter can stick on an extra 6 or 8 dates per tour, and that's what counts. Some people might question how green swanning around the world in private jets is. I see their point, but we're not spewing out fumes on a tour bus all night long. I know some band members who all have their own jet. At least we don't do that. I must admit, the expense of the jets is eye-watering though. Often, we don't pay the extra cost of hiring a stewardess. On one European tour, the band got my partner Thomas a stewardess hat to wear on the jet. We have photos of him in it. He doesn't like them much. So, now we're just one more Ponzi band zooming around in a private jet. Besides the cost, the only other drawback is the same as the transit van. You don't have any personal space. Sometimes I even sit there at 35,000 feet and find myself missing my bunk on the tour bus, but not very often. Pre-gig rituals. If a tour is a pilgrimage, then the venues that we play are temples of worship to the god of heavy metal. And, like any priest about to deliver a sermon, I have my little preparations that I have to go through before I can recite my scriptures. I probably have more pre-gig rituals than most. I'm a creature of habit, and I need to know everything is just how I like it before we can take our service. I have my routine and I follow it, well, religiously. It probably sounds a bit OCD, but I don't think it is. It's just how I am. Any band will tell you that when you're on tour, from the moment you wake up in the morning until you go on stage at 9 p.m. is dead time. You just have to keep yourself occupied. Some bands do interviews, but I hardly ever do those on the road because I like to save my voice. In an ideal world, I'd get to a venue an hour before we go on, or less, but that's not possible because priests travel as an entourage and some people have to get there earlier. So we generally arrive 2 hours before showtime, and I sat about distracting myself and killing time. There's always something to talk to management or production about. I might go for a wander backstage. I check my social media, which is fun because there are normally fans already at the gig posting photos and saying, "We're here." I feel the excitement starting to build. The dressing room will be set out just so. We'll have a food and booze room as outlined in the contract rider, and I'll have a table with all my little knickknacks laid out. It has my stage jewellery and makeup, photos of my mum and dad in little frames, and a picture of Elvis Presley. People might be surprised I have a photo of Elvis, but he's the guy who started this whole rock and roll showbiz thing rolling. Elvis was larger than life, and in a funny way, is a bit of a focus for me. I don't go to watch the support act, even if it's a band that I really like. I might have a sneaky peek at one song through the curtain, but that's it. It's a superstition. I don't really like to see the stage until I'm about to walk out on it. By the same token, priests don't do pre-gig sound checks anymore. We used to, but my God, they're boring. With technology nowadays, we can do our sound check in pre-tour rehearsals, set the levels, and our sound guys and road crew can finesse it on the day. I don't do pre-show vocal exercises. I know some singers do their scales beforehand, but I never have, at any stage in my career. I don't need to. I hope it doesn't sound arrogant, but I know if I'm in the right mental place, I can hit my notes. Our stage manager, currently a guy called Rick Benbow, watches the clock for us. Rick will keep popping in the dressing room and give us time checks to count us down to show time. 1 hour to stage time, lads. 30 minutes to go. On in 10 minutes. I have music going on my Bluetooth speaker in the dressing room before the gig. It's metal, always metal. I play Ronnie James Dio, The Last in Line, and Holy Diver, and Sabbath, probably Paranoid, maybe a bit of Slayer. I play to psych me up for the gig, and it always works. 30 minutes before showtime, I put on my stage gear. I could do it all myself. I'm not quite too old to get myself dressed yet, but all my jewellery and my in-ear monitors can be a right palaver, so I enlist the help of our wardrobe girl who takes care of our costumes and laundry on tour. She's a lovely lady called Heather, whom we naturally call Hellbent for Heather. For a while, Heather put new underpants for me on our gig rider, so they'd always be waiting for me, but it felt a bit daft. Why should the band pay for my undies? So we stopped doing that. I know some bands do inspirational pre-gig huddles and pep talks, but priests never have. It's not the yam way. Instead, the rest of the band all mooch off 10 minutes before the start and go to wait side stage. Ian always grins at me as he leaves and says, "See you on the dance floor." Left alone in the dressing room, I'll have a last-minute piss. There is nothing worse than getting on stage and needing the loo. Usually, I'll have a Red Bull before I go on, but sometimes I have a bit of a mental wrestle about it. Is it okay to have this, or will I need the toilet? I have a superstition that I always have to be the last person on stage. Rick Benbow leads me to it right before the start. It's always an exciting moment. The backstage area will be empty by now, and I'll hear the crowd screaming and Martin Walker playing our pre-show music. Rick takes me to my stage man cave. I vanish into my man cave during the show for costume changes, a swig of honey and lemon, or just a minute's rest. Some fans ask, why does Rob keep wandering off? But what am I supposed to do when Rich or Scott are doing their bit? Stand there with my arms folded, like a spare dick at a wedding? Bugger that, I'm on stage when I need to be. This is a little area behind Richie's speakers where I keep my other stage gear and my costume changes. It has to always be laid out in exactly the same way. I hate to see any changes or anything out of place. There is a little table with the Union Jack and the Black Country flag on it. Also on the table are my Bix inhaler, my packets of Airwaves gum, and a container of hot honey and lemon drink. There will be a can of Red Bull, do I dare, paracetamol, and some eye drops. The last warm-up song before we go on is always Sabbath's War Pigs, generals gathered in their masses. The crowd goes wild when they hear that, and in my man cave, I say the Serenity Prayer, the same one that I recite in bed every night before I go to sleep. God, grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, the courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. Before a show, I might be a little nervous. Actually, nervous isn't quite the right word. You might say I'm in a state of heightened awareness, but after I've said the prayer, I'm very calm. I'm acutely aware of the gig that's about to happen, and I also know that I'm totally ready for it. This is it. This is the moment. This is what I live for and what I'm about. I'm about to do something that means the world, everything to me. So let's do it. Rick appears again at the entrance to my man cave and gives me the thumbs up. Are you ready, Rob? Yep, too fucking right I am. It's showtime. After show parties. Nowadays, when I come off stage at the end of a gig, I'm done for the night. Good night, Vienna. Give me a cup of hot cocoa, tip me into bed, and read me a bedtime story. But it didn't used to be that way. All through the 70s and the early 80s, a show didn't mark the end of the night for Priest. It was the start. I'd run from the stage into the dressing room, shower and clean up, come out swigging Dom Perignon from the bottle and start raging. Seriously raging. After show parties were a huge thing back in the day, particularly in America. We'd lurch out of our dressing room to find the rest of the backstage area packed with hundreds of people schmoozing, drinking, drugging, and going mental. We might even know a couple of them. In the 70s, when bands like the Stones or Queen played London, New York, or LA, they'd compete to throw the wildest after-show party. They'd throw tens of thousands of dollars at them. Themes, costumes, dwarves with bowls of coke on their head, the works. Priest never went to those lengths, but we were always up for a full-on party. Not in our dressing room, though. Even when I used to come off stage already pissed and high, that is, every night, I didn't want anybody in our dressing room. A band's dressing room is their inner sanctum, their sacred space. I don't want anybody to see me with my head still buzzing from the gig. Even today, we still have a strict rule. The dressing room is for band, crew, and management only. Even our families are not allowed in. So, after gigs, hangers-on used to pile into our separate food and booze backstage room and wait for us. Guests, groupies, record company guys, agents, promoters, radio DJs, journalists, competition winners. At least half of them look like Artie Fufkin from This Is Spinal Tap. When we emerged, somebody from the record label would grab hold of us and maneuver us around the room. Hey, you must meet Dirk Tempest from Radio XKRY. Rob, this is Mike Meteor, the rock journalist. He's a huge fan. I'd nod, mumble a few pleasantries, and offer one hand for shaking while continuing to swig Dom Perignon from the bottle with the other. It was a ritual we had to go through, and to be honest, I never loved it. The drinking was brill, but yam-yams like us aren't good at schmoozing. It can all feel a bit false. And the worst thing about those backstage parties was people ladling me with bloody compliments. Oh my God, that was the best show I ever saw. That was awesome. You are the most amazing singer in the history of heavy metal, all of music. You're the greatest. Don't you know that? No, I bloody don't. As I've said, I've never been good at taking praise, no matter how sincerely meant. It doesn't sit well with me. I'd normally cope by finishing off the Dom Perignon and starting on the 16 cans of Budweiser I also had carefully lined up. After-show parties could last deep and long into the night. They might move from place to place. We'd jump into cabs to a club, and then, hours later, back to the hotel bar. I'd often black out and wake up in my room
Almost done
at
with
midday
this.
without
I have
a
one more. Oh
clue
my god.
how I'd got there. Fuck it, who cares? Which city are we in anyway? They were the wild days of music industry excess, but like all golden ages, they came to an end. Around the end of the 80s, as grunge kicked in and rock hedonism was seen as passé, excess gave way to austerity. Crazy after-show parties were no more. I didn't mind personally. I was sober by then, so meet and greets and glad handing felt like a chore. In every city, there would usually be one or two old friends or allies I was happy to see again for a minute or two. But at most parties, I'd be thinking, get me out of here. Today, record labels are more likely to throw album launch parties. They're fairly muted affairs, often inside the record company itself. A playback of the album, a few nibbles, some beer and wine for media bods, and home by tea time, which is just how I like it. On the road, we come off stage, wind down in the dressing room, and eat together in the rider room. We don't hold an inquest on the gig. In fact, we often don't even talk about the show. We just share a bit of banter and relax. On the very rare occasions nowadays, when the record company tries to get us to an after-show party, I react with absolute horror. It's the last thing I want to do. I feel like saying to them, are you kidding me? I've just screamed my tits off for 2 hours, and now you want me to go and make small talk and chinwag? Forget it. After-show parties aren't enjoyable for me now. Parties are meant to be relaxing, but I'm the singer. If I go to our own party, every eye is on me and everybody wants a chat, a selfie, a piece of me. It's wearying. Plus, I'm sober. Watching everyone else get drunk is no fun. It's one of the many things that change as you get older. I used to love after-show parties. Now, I'll do anything to avoid them. My alarm bells go off and my internal monologue goes something like this. Hey, I've done my show and I've clocked off, mate. I'm finished for the night. Now it's me time. You want to go and party? Great. Knock yourself out? Right. Where's my cocoa mug? Festivals. Back in the day, Priest would play one-off festival shows even if we weren't on tour at the time. Why not? All that we needed was our van, our gear, and the clothes we were standing up in. It was an innocent, uncluttered experience, and there was a real purity to it. We can't just rock up and play like that nowadays, now that we've transformed into a travelling behemoth of trucks, rigs, lighting, enormous stage sets, and scores of road crew. That world is gone. But if we're already out on the road, we love to squeeze a festival or two into our itinerary. Playing a festival is not like doing your own gig. The biggest difference is that not everyone is there to see you. The festival may be a celebration of our genre of metal, but some fans won't have ever seen us before. There might be a degree of indifference or even hostility. Nowadays, we're in the lucky position that we'll usually be the festival headliner. This removes the hassle of playing halfway down a bill, but it adds a kind of pressure. You have to smash it to be so strong that the crowd instinctively think, yep, that's why they're headlining. The first festival I went to as a punter was a biggie. It was the Isle of Wight Pop Festival in 1970. The famous landmark event with The Doors, The Who, Family, I used to bloody love that band, and Jimi Hendrix, who took the stage in the early hours of Monday morning, just weeks before he died. I was blown away by the whole thing. It was such an adventure. I twigged straight away that it wasn't just about the bands, but the whole festival experience. It wasn't so much, bloody hell, I'm watching Hendrix, as, bloody hell, I'm at the Isle of Wight Festival. It felt a pretty wild event. It was primeval, primordial. Fans were literally rolling around in the mud. There were more than 500,000 people, and at some point, the fences got pulled down and everyone poured in for nothing. The thinking was, music should be free, man. I might even have been into that hippie ideal then. Now I figure it's a bit different. You've got to pay the bands, because we ain't gonna play for free. Priest's first festival as a band was the Reading Festival in 1975. As I said in Confess, we lucked onto the bottom of the bill via a casting couch route. when a mate of the band allowed one of the bookers to give him a blowjob. But once we were there, we were determined to make it count. We opened the whole festival, gave it our all, and I stalked around the stage in a red jerkin like a mad marionette. If I look at it now on YouTube, I just think, who are those guys? Huh? Is that really me? But it was such a big deal for us at the time, and I think it opened a few doors. I remember doing a festival in Finland, in Free Love Scandinavia, in 1976. The first thing we saw when we got on site was couples openly fucking in ditches. Ken boggled out of the van window and said, she'd be a bit of all right. He wanted to line up a shag before we'd even played a note. It was the height of summer. We got bombarded by mosquitoes, and we had to go on stage in broad sunshine. It was exciting, but it disoriented me. If I had had my way, there'd be no such thing as daytime gigs. Heavy metal is destined to be played in the dark. Priest have had landmark festivals in our career. One of the biggest was Day on the Green in California in 1977, supporting Led Zeppelin at the end of our first tour of America. At the express request of Robert Plant. 45 years on, it still feels mad to me to write that sentence. Probably an equally significant festival for us was Monsters of Rock in 1980. It was momentous because it was the first time that a promoter had set up an event that was purely rock and metal and held it in the birthplace of metal, the Midlands at Castle Donington. Oddly enough, that promoter, Maurice Jones, later lived next door to me in Walsall for years before he died in 2009. It's a small world. We were on with Scorpions and Saxon and Rainbow headline. We got changed in a crummy little caravan, but it was a fantastic day. I still have a photo of me backstage with Rudy Schenker that I will always treasure. I've got a pint in one hand and a whip in the other. Priests were just starting to get big, and we decided to let off fireworks at the end of our set. We had bought a handful of rockets, then learned that Rainbow was setting off £10,000 worth of fireworks for their climax. It would have made ours look feeble, so we abandoned the plan. Instead, Ian and I decided to let them off at my house on bonfire night. We had a couple of mortars, but we had no idea they were heavy-duty industrial fireworks for professional displays only. In my back garden, we ignited them with a 9-volt battery like the instructions told us to do. Whoosh, bang, crash, fizz. They shot miles into the air, exploded, and turned the skies above my quiet residential area into a riot of lurid colours and what sounded like war zone gunfire. Fuck me. Ian and I gawped at each other. It felt like Krakatoa was erupting over Walsall. We could hear doors opening everywhere and people saying, "What the bloody hell was that?" So we scarpered back in the house. We later learned that one mortar shell landed on the roof of the local cricket club and set it alight. Oops, maybe we would have upstaged Rainbow after all. I have some crazy festival memories. The US Festival in San Bernardino in 1983 was quite corporate, but it gave us the chance to fly in by chopper and play to 330,000 metal maniacs. And, of course, Live Aid 2 years later in Philadelphia wasn't the kind of experience that you forget in a hurry. In the 21st century, we've got involved in 1 or 2 travelling festivals. I like the whole idea behind that. To me, it's just the same as in medieval days, when parties of minstrels would travel from town to town. That's what a travelling festival is, a rock and roll circus rolling into town. When I rejoined Priest after my time away, we went across America with Ozfest in 2004. Sharon Osbourne had founded it in 1996 after the organisers of Lollapalooza sneered at her when she asked them if Ozzy could be on the bill. Trust me, you do not sneer at Sharon Osbourne. Lollapalooza was dead by 2004, but Ozfest was a major annual event in the metal calendar. We went on before the headliners, Black Sabbath, with Slayer, Slipknot, Lamb of God, and Dimmy Borgir also on the bill. It was ace. The festival had a real sense of community, and I loved that we bumped into our fellow metal minstrels in catering every day. We didn't see a lot of Ozzy, who gets psyched up before shows, but Sharon was always floating around backstage and up for a chat. Other metal bands have copied Ozfest, like Slipknot doing Knotfest. We've never done a Priest Fest as such, but our Metal Masters tour in 2008 with Motorhead, Heaven and Hell and Testament wasn't too far away. We still occasionally think of doing something similar. Today, there are well-established metal and rock festivals all around the globe. Wacken in Germany and Graspop in Belgium are huge. We have played Hellfest in France, and there are metal festivals in Asia, South America, and even African nations like Botswana and Namibia. In Britain, the prime metal events are Download and Bloodstock. If I'm honest, I prefer Bloodstock. I like that it is family-run and has a nice, organic, honest feel, whereas to me, Download has become all about the money and is very corporate. Festivals can always get trashed by poxy weather. At the last Download we played in 2015, it pissed down as soon as we went on. It was cold and miserable, and we were playing to a sea of drowned rats in plastic ponchos. You do your best, but it's hard work for the band and the fans. In contrast, the last Bloodstock we played in August 2021 was very special for me, for many reasons. I had just beaten prostate cancer. I'd just turned 70, and it was our first gig after 18 months of COVID-induced lockdowns and inactivity. Yeah, bring it on. I could have been nervous, but everything just felt right. A British metal band headlining the biggest and best British metal festival on their own turf. We were back. The night was magical. The crowd roar when Glenn came out to join us for the encore is something I will never forget. Priest are used to metal festivals, but I still wonder sometimes about playing more general events, alongside all sorts of music. Metal bands can do that now that we're no longer viewed as pariahs. Metallica headlined Glastonbury in 2014, and nobody batted an eyelid. I think I'd like to do it because it would be a throwback to the days we could just turn up, plug in, and play without a £500,000 stage set and lights. All that matter are the band and the songs. And Glastonbury now is like the Isle of Wight in 1970. It sells out for the event, not for the artists. So, would I like Priest to play Glastonbury, second from top of the bill, between Dua Lipa and Billie Eilish? Yeah, I would. We are not so up our own arses that we demand to headline, and it would be an adventure and a box to tick off. So, who knows? Maybe one day you'll see us down on the farm. Hotels. When you're taking your scriptures around the globe, you spend a lot of time in hotels. You can be living on room service for more than a year. I know some metal and rock bands don't like this and see hotels as a necessary evil, but I don't. I bloody love them. When we're on tour, my hotel room is my sanctuary. If we have a day or two off, I do my level best not to leave the room once. I don't want to see the local sights or go out to dinner. I just want my bed, my TV, my phone, and my iPad. At the point in our career that Priest are at now, we're lucky enough to be able to afford a bit of luxury. But it wasn't always like that. As I said earlier, in our early years, we'd kip in the van or drive home after gigs, or if we had a few bob for once, we'd crash out in a local B&B. Corky might occasionally book somewhere in advance, but 9 times out of 10, we'd run off stage, climb into the van, and hare around the streets looking for B&B signs. There'd be 6 or 7 of us, pissed, knocking on a door just before midnight. "Have you got a room, please?" And it would just be one room. If they'd let us, we'd all squeeze into a double room to save money. 2 or 3 lucky people would get to share the bed, and the rest of us would pass out in chairs on the floor or in the bath. These guest houses could be pretty rough and ready. I remember one night, somewhere up north, Corky got us a room. It was the middle of winter and we had no heating. It was so cold that none of us could fall asleep. Ken lay on the floor and rolled himself up in the carpet. At another place, the landlady's teenage daughter was prowling around, excited that we were a band. Nothing happened, but next morning at breakfast, the landlady went ballistic at us. "I know what you're after, you bastard. Get out." We had to leg it without any breakfast. Once in a blue moon, we'd have a lovely B&B experience. I remember staying in a beautiful place in the Scottish Highlands. The location was idyllic, and the older married couple who ran the place could not have made us more welcome. We were used to flea pits, but they looked after us so well. The rooms were immaculate, they gave us mountains of breakfast, and as we piled into the van to leave, they serenaded us. "Will you no come back again?" I was half expecting them to put on kilts and pipe us out. When we could afford to stomp up for more than one room and pair up, Ken was usually my roommate. We clicked in that way and rubbed along pretty well. He was a horrible snorer, but then again, so am I. Luckily, we were normally both so pissed that we just passed out. I'd always tuck into the B&B breakfast, but Ken never would. He was so obsessed with his weight. "Look, I can still fit into these jeans that I've had since I was 15, that I never saw him eat." KK Downing was the Patsy Stone of heavy metal. Played by Joanna Lumley, Patsy Stone was the stick-thin, hard-partying, promiscuous, fashion mag editor best mate of Adina Monsoon, Jennifer Saunders, in the 90s BBC sitcom Absolutely Fabulous. Just picture Ken with a beehive and a cigarette holder. Actually, no, don't picture that. When Priest got a major deal, our tour accommodation improved. When we weren't on tour buses, we graduated from crappy B&Bs to actual hotels. Mostly they were Holiday Inns, which were identical whether we were in Chicago, Orlando, Miami, Dallas, or wherever. Occasionally, we'd stay elsewhere to break the Holiday Inn monotony. We went to the legendary Edgewater Inn in Seattle, where you can fish out the window of your room. Unlike Led Zeppelin's road crew, we didn't get up to any mudshark-related shenanigans with groupies. Although we'd gone up in the world, we still shared rooms, and I carried on pairing with Ken. After our gigs, we'd hit the hotel bar or bring booze from our backstage rider back to our room to carry on drinking. We never touched the minibar though, it was way too pricey. I made use of some of the facilities though. After Priest finally started getting our own rooms rather than sharing, I began taking an interest in the XXX movies that you used to be able to get via the little box on top of your hotel TV set. I never actually rented them out because A, they were all straight porn, which obviously wasn't of interest to me, and B, I would have felt too mortified paying for them at reception when we checked out. But I did work out a nice little cheat shortcut to get myself off. The XXX movies used to have a short preview feature before the screen pixelated and you had to pay for the goods. Well, a cock is a cock, wherever it is going. So I'd cruise the various 15-second previews looking for something to take my fancy. I'd plan it like a military campaign. I'd play with myself until I was ready, right on the edge, and then hit the best some frenzied masturbatory action. Alone in countless holiday inns across America, I perfected the art of the 15-second wank. Talk about embarrassing. In fact, I can't believe that I've just told you that. But, as I've said before, sometimes it does your soul the world of good to confess. I never got into the cliched rock star thing of trashing hotel rooms. It just seemed stupid. Someone would have to clean it up, and I knew I'd have to pay for it. This was just as well, as the one time that I tried to do it, I was bloody useless. I can't remember where in America I was, but I was falling down drunk in my room, and suddenly, fuck knows why, I hated the TV. I could have just turned it off, but instead, I suddenly visualized myself smashing it up and hurling it out of the window like a real rock star. I picked it up, but the wires from the back of the set were welded to the wall, or if they weren't, I was too pissed to be able to work out how to disconnect them. All I could do was stagger around my room carrying the heavy telly, still firmly tethered to the wall. This made me totally livid. I just about managed to manhandle it to the room door and I shoved it outside. The power cable was blocking my door so it wouldn't shut properly and, worst of all, the TV was still on. I could hear it chattering away in the corridor. Fuck knows what the hotel made of me. A proper rock star would have smashed up the set with the baseball bat and hurled it out the window. I just sort of humped it out of the room and left it safely in one piece in the hallway, still turned on. Pathetic. The bane of my life in tour hotels was, it still is, early morning calls. I'd do anything I could do to avoid them. But Jim Sylvia would book calls for the whole band at 8 in the morning without asking us, even if it was a day off. After I'd had my beauty sleep rudely disturbed by the receptionist, I'd phone Jim's room and yell at him, "Sylvia, what do you think you're bloody doing again? I told you if we leave any later than this, we won't have time to do anything when we get to the next city. I don't want to do anything. How many times have I got to tell you it's a day off?" And repeat. The reason I used to get so pissed off with Sylvia is that my sleep is very precious to me. I never stint on it or take it for granted because I have suffered from chronic insomnia for my entire life. It's horrible and there is no cure for it. It's always harder to sleep in hotels than in your own bed, and I think it is a miracle that I've gone on this long in Judas Priest. I'm not joking, I'm amazed at my own tenacity and that I didn't give up touring years ago and just say, I can't do this any longer, this is fucking shit. You can go mad lying awake in the dark for hour after hour. Insomnia is an ordeal and all I can do is try to live with it. Nowadays, when priests check into a hotel, I have a list of requests and rituals to try to ensure I can grab at least a little shut-eye. I always want a room on a high floor at the very end of a corridor. This means I only have one shared wall with another room, and I'm at least a little insulated from the noise and commotion of businessmen banging around their rooms at 7:30 a.m. getting ready for work. Thomas and I can't share a bedroom because our snoring drives each other nuts, so he will take the room next to me. I also pull my bed away from the wall because otherwise it works like a soundbox. Headboards will pick up noise from the room next to, above, and below you. I need 6 pillows on the bed, earplugs, a face mask, and the room to be as cold as possible. The exorcist levels of freezing. I carry a flat box fan with me everywhere I go. I put it as high on the bed as I can, so when I'm lying down, I can hear it droning and feel it vibrating the bed. Even after all this palaver, there is no guarantee I'll get to sleep. I say my prayers and read my book of meditations, just like I do at home. I do the Kegels that I started after my prostate cancer. I've recently started deep breathing exercises. They actually seem to help a little. I even take some pills, although they're not real sleeping pills. They're more like placebos. It's just a psychological thing. And then, of course, if I finally manage to drop off at about 4 in the morning, I wake up and have to go for a piss because I'm a bloke in his 70s. Because I've rarely had a good night's sleep, I never go down to the hotel dining room for breakfast. Well, that's not the only reason. The other one is that I bloody resent paying $25 for a cup of coffee and a couple of eggs over easy. As my dad would have said, what a rip-off. Instead, Thomas goes out and finds the nearest Starbucks or 7-Eleven. He's like a homing pigeon for them. He comes to my room around midday with a carrier bag full of miniature cereal boxes, mini cartons of milk, and a couple of little fruit juices, and we knock up breakfast there. After 50 years on the road, I'm a fast and efficient packer. I don't even need a suitcase. I just carry a little roll-on thing with shorts and a clean t-shirt in it. I've never once had a cause to use a hotel Corby trouser press, probably because I rarely wear long trousers. There are hotels around the world that I always look forward to staying in because they are beautiful and they treat me so well. Sadly, I can't name them here to protect my privacy. By the same token, I'd better not share the pseudonym I've been checking in under since forever. On pilgrimages with priests, we stay in top-end hotels, but we don't look like typical top-end hotel guests. We're not walking around in pinstripe suits or smart casual leisure wear, and wearing our heavy metal gear in la-di-da places can attract snobbery or even horror. I remember going for lunch with Thomas in a Paris hotel some years ago. I was in my usual daily wear of shorts and t-shirt, and an old couple, done up to the nines at the next table, kept shooting me hateful looks throughout our entire meal. Mad. After they were finished and were on their way out, they stopped at our table. The wife looked down her nose at me and asked, "How dare you come here to eat dressed like that? You are practically naked." Blimey, I was quite taken aback. But that's the French for you. Hometown gigs. Over the last 50 years, Judas Priest have ranged far and wide across the globe, and I played shows in more countries than I ever imagined I'd visit in my life. Yet, I can't deny that, like any band, it feels very special when you come to play a hometown gig. It's just human nature. You feel so many emotions playing to your own people. Excitement, satisfaction, and, most of all, validation. In a way, you're completing a cycle that began when you were a lad living at home and dreaming of conquering the world through music. It's not quite, there you are, showed you. That's too negative. It's more that there is truth in that classic phrase, local boys make good. The Express and Star, the paper I read as a kid, calls us local legends Judas Priest. Every time we come home, it always makes me smile. Hometown gigs resonate even more when you play venues where you went to gigs in your teens. You look out and remember standing in the crowd, wondering, what must it be like to be up there, on that stage? What does it feel like? Now you know, it feels bloody great. I saw my idol, Freddie Mercury and Queen at Birmingham Town Hall, so it was a huge deal for me when Priest first played there with Budgie in 1974. There again, that was a funny old gig. It was Glenn's first gig with the band, which we celebrated by accidentally blowing up the speakers. It meant even more to me to play Birmingham Odeon. It was a funny venue, a cinema during the day when they pulled the screen up and held gigs at night. I'd seen so many great shows there, such as Genesis with Peter Gabriel, that headline the Odeon always felt special. That was why it hurt us so much when Priest turned up hours late for gigs there, not once but twice, after we'd been delayed recording Top of the Pops in London. I'm not kidding, the memory of being slagged off by our own pissed off fans at the venue still makes me wince, 40 years on. One local show with far happier memories is Priest playing the Birmingham NEC on 2005's Retribution tour after I just rejoined the band. I was back after years in the wilderness, fronting the band that I loved in a sold-out hometown Enormo Dome show. I mean, what's not to love? When you play hometown gigs, you have a unique connection with the crowd. They're your people. You come from the same place and you talk the same. They may even be gawping at you, thinking, if they made it, why can't I? They don't feel like fans, they feel like family. Often, of course, your own family's in the crowd. When they were still alive, my mum and dad came to tons of our local gigs. I used to wonder, do they actually enjoy my yowling of the deafening guitars? I don't think it mattered. They were just proud of their boy up there. There may be a slight added pressure to playing hometown gigs. In a way, you feel a little more under the microscope than usual. You find yourself wanting to wrench the volume and the effort up past 11, just to prove to your people that you deserve to be where you are. I sometimes wonder, does my accent
I'll be putting this in
slip back
dye.
into yum a bit more when we
Black
play
dye.
Birmingham or Wolverhampton? I suspect it might. Having said that, I don't walk on stage at hometown gigs and say, all right, are you there, Babs? How am you? It's busted to be back. But maybe I should.
Oh my God.
Tour madness.
I don't know.
Every metal and rock band loves to set out on a pilgrimage. As I've said, playing live is the best part, the main point of
This
being
one's
in the
cool.
group.
It's a two-headed dragon.
And yet, there is every chance that at some point on the jaunt, tour madness will set in. When you're on tour, every day is Groundhog Day. Hotel, plane or bus, venue, gig, hotel, plane or bus, venue, gig, hotel, plane or bus, venue, gig. If you're not careful, the identical days will merge into one. And if you're not even more careful, it can do your head in. The raison d'etre of a tour is the 2 hours you spend on stage every night. They are always fantastic, but there are hours, acres of dead time every day leading up to that moment, and how you fill them defines whether or when tour madness sets in. Hanging around for hours with nothing to do, you focus and fixate on the smallest, most unimportant things. You can start to notice your bandmates' characteristics and find them hugely annoying. That's when intra-band tensions set in. Little things start to wind you up. It can be the way somebody in the band blows their nose, or even how they sit. Or you might find yourself sitting in catering, staring at them, getting wound up over nothing at all. Jesus, does he have to always mash his spuds and gravy up like that every single bloody day? Fucking hell, he's eating it with his mouth open again. And why does he have to laugh like that? These things shouldn't matter, and they don't matter. But when you're living on top of each other 24/7, they can feel like they do. That's when you get irritated and start to peck at each other. If you're not careful, it can start to seriously rock the boat. It's no secret that, historically, most of the friction in Priest used to be between Ken and Glenn, more of which is in the Book of Lamentations. But they weren't the only culprits. Familiarity breeds contempt. And we've all had a pop at each other at one time or another. Nobody is a saint. Ian Hill is the most placid of men. an oasis of calm in the band. But I once saw him wang his room key at the head of a male receptionist in a French hotel who had inadvertently given him the wrong key. Luckily, he missed. Tour madness gets to the best of us. It creeps up on you. I used to get as bored, vexed and riled on tour as the next bloke, and I'd usually escape Groundhog Days via another slug of Jack or line of Coke. I'd believe it was helping, but in truth, it was helping grudges to fester in my mind and putting me in a downward spiral. It made things worse. In fact, it wasn't until I stopped drinking and drugging and got sober that I understood the only way to cope with tour madness, and that is to remind myself of the importance of the show, of every show. Sidelined and distracted by booze and drugs, I lost track in the mid-80s of just how important our music and shows are. It took getting sober to remind me of how important they are to our fans and to us. When you're playing the same songs night after night, it's easy to forget people in the crowd may be seeing you for the first time in 10 years, or they may never have seen you before. They've saved up, bought a ticket, ring the date on their calendar, and count it down for weeks. Only 3 weeks until I'm seeing Priest. Only 10 days to go. 2 sleeps to go. Yay, tonight is the night. No longer performing while I'm off my tits, I remind myself that that was what I used to be like when I was paying to see bands. Well, people are exactly the same with us, and crucially, that applies to every single show. When you're a band crisscrossing America and ticking off dates on your tour schedule, it's easy to think of some shows as more important than others. You look at your itinerary and New York leaps out at you more than Cleveland. Los Angeles stands out over Biloxi. Well, that's bollocks. Every date is as important as the next. Every show will have wide-eyed, super excited fans who've played Priest albums to death but never seen us live before. And it's our job, our responsibility, our pleasure to give them the best show we possibly can. Now that I'm a sober 70-year-old metalhead, every Priest gig means the world to me. A single show today can mean more than the weeks of dates that I dialed in the 80s, when I was pissed and in my pits. I'm way more serious about gigs now. The other reason I'm better at coping with tour madness is simple. I'm older. I have the wisdom of age. If I start feeling negative or down on the road, I can recognize it, and I will know how to deal with it, because I've been through it before. Some people like to be on the road forever. A few years ago, at the end of a year-long tour, I overheard Richie and Scott on the tour bus talking about how they wanted to add on extra dates. Man, we could do at least 2 more months yet. It made me laugh, but I loved their enthusiasm. Every time we end a tour and I put my keys in my front door in Phoenix or Warsaw, I have the warm feeling of a job well done. It always feels great to get home, and yet I can guarantee that within 2 weeks, I'll be wishing I was back out on the road again. Well, that's musicians for you. We're never bloody satisfied. The Book of Vestments. Much like Moses and the Israelites in that other Bible, metal and hard rock fans used to wander in the wilderness. For years and years, they were ridiculed and patronized. The music they loved was not afforded the respect given to other musical scriptures. The fans responded to this with defiance and by donning a uniform, garments of denim and leather that showed that they belonged to the cult gang of the metal community. These vestments showed they felt pride in that sacred music, whatever its mockers and detractors said. Metal is no longer a mocked, belittled music, but its disciples still hold firm to its dress code. They still don the vestments. Anywhere in the world that you see a guy or girl in the street in a battle vest, you'll know they are a metalhead who listens to Motorhead, Iron Maiden, Def Leppard, and Judas Priest, and more power to them. Denim and leather. The two defining vestments of metal and rock fans are denim and leather. Priest's Yorkshire musical mates, Saxon, celebrated these two venerated fabrics in 1981 in a great song and album title track. Denim and leather brought us all together. The Bible is not always that keen on mix and match fashion. In the book of Deuteronomy, it advises, "You shall not wear cloth of wool and linen mixed together." Well, I'm sorry, Lord, but some clothes combos just work, and denim and leather is a lifelong metalhead classic. As a youth, I found my way to denim pretty quickly. I had a couple of detours along the way. At the end of the Peace and Love 60s, I was swanning around Walsall in an anti-Vietnam olive green US GI jacket with peace symbols on it. They were all the rage for a while. That jacket was probably a precursor to a military uniform sexual fetish that I developed later in life, but that's another story. When the 70s dawned, I began the decade very partial to a 3/4 length herringbone coat that I wore for absolutely everything. I accessorized it with very long hair and loon pants, stylish, and took that look into my early bands and the very start of Priest. Then I got bang into denim. I was seduced by the Marlboro Man, the classic American advert of a guy in double denim and cowboy boots smoking a fag on a horse. I could never afford Levi's, but I'd prowled the Oasis clothes market in Birmingham in search of knockoff Wranglers. Metal fans really appropriated denim with the rise of the battle vest. This was, and is, a sleeveless vest with patches of the bands you love sewn on the back. As soon as Priest got big enough to have merchandise, a battle vest patch was one of the first things we flogged. In the same way that the Marlboro Man glamorized denim, Elvis and James Dean popularized leather. You only had to clock Marlon Brando in The Wild One to realize that leather equals trouble. Put on a leather jacket and you were a rebel on the fringes of society. No wonder metal and rock fans fancied a bit of that. I got into both looks big time and started to wear a regular black leather motorcycle jacket with a sleeveless denim top. I took that combo on stage on a couple of early Priest tours. The only thing with the classic denim and leather get-up of the early 70s was that it could get a bit whiffy. Metal and heavy rock fans in those days were not regular patrons of laundrettes or dry cleaners. I reckon some jeans and battle vests could stand up by themselves. I was no different. After my endless nights propping up the bar at my local The Dirty Duck, my denim and leathers would properly reek of cigarettes and booze. You almost took pride in the authenticity of the stench. Ha! Hygiene was for squares, right? At most, you'd cover up the odor of your metalhead uniform with Brute, splash it all over like Henry Cooper, Old Spice, or a nice big dollop of patchouli oil. Ah, the smell of the 70s. It takes me back. Henry Cooper was a British heavyweight champion boxer. He fought Muhammad Ali, then Cassius Clay, for the world title, knocked him down, and very nearly beat him. But he's still best remembered by some for saying, "Splash it all over," in a TV ad for cheap aftershave. Band images. Bands have always known the importance of a snazzy set of vestments. When I started getting into music in my early teens, the groups I saw on Jukebox Jury, Ready Steady Go, or the early episodes of Top of the Pops, all had a certain planned look, whether it was smart or hippie-esque. Yet the first band whose look really spoke to me was the Beatles. When they ran out at Shea Stadium with their mop-top hairdos and matching Nehru jackets, they looked fantastic. The image represented the music. Next to them, the Rolling Stones were just a bunch of scruff bags. I've always said the look of a band, whatever type of music they play, is almost as important as the music. I loved the flamboyant clobber of the early 70s British glam rockers like Slade and The Sweet, even if they were treading a thin line between glamour and panto. Oh, yes, they were. So, it's bizarre and unfortunate that in our early years, Priest had no sartorial style at all. We never talked about how we should look, and we were totally at sea. Just look at the band picture on Stained Class. For some reason, I seem to be wearing a fucking schoolboy's tie. And was I in AC/DC? No. Or Exhibit B, a photo of us supporting Led Zeppelin in California in 1977. I'm in some kind of kimono, Ken sporting red trousers, Ian's a vision in white satin, Glenn appears to be in an Irish jig band, and Les Binks is in a bloody rugby shirt. Frankly, we were a visual catastrophe. Who'd have thought we'd go from that dog's dinner to inventing one of the most distinctive images in the history of heavy metal? Yet, that was exactly what happened the following year, and the transformation was almost overnight. Ken had the initial brainwave. He'd been playing around with wearing leather for a bit. There are all Priest photos of him in leather trousers, a leather vest, and a choker. I liked the look, so I went down to London with him to get measured up for some leather gear myself. When I got it, I loved how it felt and how it made me feel. So Priest had our first discussion about our image. Glenn and Ian were up for it, and in no time, we were all decked out in black leather. When we all got together in our new gear for the first time, it was an absolute epiphany. It felt perfect. We looked at ourselves and we thought, oh, this is exactly who we are, isn't it? The way we look is the way we sound. Why didn't we realize earlier? We weren't doing it for a laugh. We were deadly serious about our new image. I knew we were nicking elements of Marlon Brando and macho biker wear and S&M gay subculture, but we took them and turned them into a look that was totally Priest. We reinvented ourselves. Over the years, people have said our look is camp, but that's wrong. It was never our intention. Others reckon that I started wearing studs and leather as a means to express my repressed homosexuality at the time, but let me make it clear, that is utter bollocks. To anybody who says, oh, Rob Halford was sending out a gay message, no, I fucking wasn't. My leather gear was, and is, nothing to do with my personal proclivities or my sex life. Glenn, Ken and Ian were all wearing that stuff as well. Are they all supposed to be gay? I've never been to a dark S&M kinky sex bar in my life. I mean, live and let live, but I don't have the slightest interest in them. I started wearing leather for exactly the same reason that I still wear it today. I look in the mirror and I think, yeah, that's exactly how I feel inside. Admittedly, I did take the look further than the others. I soon got well into studded wristbands, bullet belts, chains and leather caps. As for my whip and handcuffs, well, they're great accessories. Fans to gawp at and talk about on their way home from the show. Not too long after we adopted leather, we got our first ever stylist, and our only one to date. Brown has dressed Priest for nigh on 40 years now, and he is brilliant. When we first began working with him, he was a revelation. Ray and I sit down before each tour and discuss the general theme that we want. Then he goes away and creates a bespoke look for each band member. He always intuits exactly what we need. Ray is totally part of the Priest family. He even lives in Phoenix nowadays, like me. Ray isn't just a visionary designer, He's practical. Running around the stage in leather trousers for 2 hours makes you sweaty around the crotch, so Ray suggested I wear chaps instead. It gives you more room to spread your legs, as it were, and avoid gusset irritation. Our leather look has occasionally proved controversial over the years. In 2001, the protest group People for the Ethical Treatment of Animals, PETA, wrote to us asking us to use our metal to riff against animal abuse and to stop wearing leather. The PETA people said they were big Priest fans and, with tongue-in-cheek I hope, asked us to rename Hellbent for Leather as Hellbent for Pleather, the synthetic leather substitute. The irony was that we were a step ahead of them, as we had adopted pleather already. Ray Brown had switched us onto this faux leather a few years earlier. As well as the animal rights aspect, he pointed out that pleather is a better material to wear on the road because it will take all the rough and tumble of touring. It also washes and cleans up a load easier. Pleather doesn't have the classic smell of leather, smell the glove, as Spinal Tap famously said, but it's a lot more supple and flexible. It gets the job done. I still have a few classic real leather things in my homes in Phoenix and Walsall though, just for old time's sake. Priest's image has developed as we've played with it over the years, but some fans love our 80s era. They were hooked on that classic look of me in the black motorcycle jacket, chaps, boots, studded belt, biker cap, dark glasses and whip, and they want me to look like that forever. They see that look as the archetypal visual definition of heavy metal. I agree with them, it is, but I like to keep things fresh and mix things up a little. I love my Danny LaRue costume changes during the shows, and some songs need a different look from others. Danny LaRue was a female impersonator and drag queen who was always on telly in Britain in the 60s and 70s. He was ahead of his time, and surprise, I thought he was great. Priest have been all about leather for more than 40 years now, but when we close our encore with Living After Midnight, I come out in a full-length denim battle vest. It has loads of patches of metal bands I love: Sabbath, Maiden, Anthrax, Pantera, Black Label Society. When I do that, I'm saying to the fans, I'm one of you. Okay, I may be the singer of the band you've come to see, but I wear the patches and the insignia just like you. I identify with you. I know the value and the importance of making that known to them. For 50 heavy metal years, I am wearing gold leather, or rather gold pleather. 50 is always represented by gold, as in people celebrating their golden wedding anniversary, and I think Judas Priest getting to 50 is worth marking visually as well as musically. I'm proud of many things that Priest have achieved, and the heart and the soul of everything is obviously the music, the albums and the gigs. But I'm also proud that we played a big part in inventing the style and the design and the very look of heavy metal, because I think that we did. Hair. I talked at the start of this book of vestments about the uniform that metalheads don to show their allegiance. Well, no part of that uniform is more important than their hair. Hair is crucial in rock and metal, as it has been in music since Elvis's quiff and the Beatles' mop tops. The 60s was the first era that long hair on a male began to represent rebellion. The hippies sported shoulder-length locks to show that they were nonconformists. They were kicking back against the squares, and they didn't fit into your bourgeois society, man. Long hair in heavy metal and rock was initially a continuation of that attitude. It was still a pushback against the straights, but it became more accepted in the 70s. Men could go to work in offices and factories with long hair as long as it wasn't too out of control. As a confirmed music freak and trainee metalhead, I had long hair for yonks when I was a young bloke. It was swishing around my collar when I was selling non-tapered trousers at Harry Fenton's, and when I joined my early bands, then started out in Priest. Ken, Ian, Glenn and John Hinch all had their hair long as well, but I didn't always stick with that look. My sister Sue, then a trainee hairdresser, gave me a bubble perm around the time of Rock'n'Roller. Not many photos of that survive. I'm quite pleased about that fact. Over the next years, I veered around looking for my own separate identity. I flirted with facial hair, both with sideburns and mustaches. In Priest's video, Don't Go, from Point of Entry, I had a weird little tash halfway between Hitler and Blakey from On the Buses. On the Buses was an early 70s British sitcom, and thus full of lewd, sexist humour set in a London bus depot. Blakey was a middle-aged Jobsworth boss. Google him. He wasn't a great visual role model. I had a full-on beard for a bit, and by the time Priest were playing the US Festival in 1983, my hair was cropped and dyed peroxide blonde. I'm still not entirely sure why I adopted that look. I was just experimenting, and I'd always fancied blonde blokes. I was still blonde, but with my hair combed into a mullet at the back by the turbo era. By then, the peroxide was coming in handy. I was starting to get distinctly follically challenged, and dyeing my hair blonde meant that my scalp didn't show through quite as much. I had to face facts. I was losing my hair. This is obviously a big deal for a metalhead, but I was quite stoical about it. I'd have loved to have had a sweeping leonine mane like Sebastian Bach or David Coverdale. However, obviously, that wasn't the hand or the head that I'd been dealt. I started receding at the front and sprouting a bald patch at the back. I'd always told myself that if that started happening, I'd just shave it all off. First of all, though, I tried to fight my incipient baldness. Rogaine is a pricey men's hair restorer, which in those days came in a box. For months, I carefully followed their instructions and washed my hair with the shampoo, massaged a clear liquid into my scalp, then combed my hair and let it dry naturally. It made not the slightest bloody difference. In Los Angeles, I heard about two girls who did hair weaves for all the metal bands, and I went to their house to see them. They weaved me an insane amount of hair. I thought it looked fucking ridiculous, but they swore it would be great. It has to look like this at first, Rob. Just give it a few days to settle in, they said. Oh, okay. I took my new false mane back to my hotel, where I was in excruciating pain. They had sewn the weave so tight into my skull that it was torture. I lay awake all night in agony, and first thing in the morning, I phoned the girls again. You've got to take this shit off, I told them. I went back, and they took the whole thing out. It took them hours to put in and 5 minutes to take out, and that was my sole experience of hair extensions. Around the time of Painkiller, I finally took the plunge and shaved my bonds. I did it myself. It reminded me of something I had read years earlier about Buddhism. One of its tenets is that when a man shaves his head, it helps him to remove his ego. I felt okay about shaving my head. It took some problems away. Bands crimp themselves like crazy before they go on stage. Well, I don't have to worry about that anymore, and it was no longer a problem to do photo shoots outside on a windy day. I didn't feel like I'd lost my power, like Samson. I didn't feel any less heavy metal. The irony is, of course, that a shaven head is also a kind of statement and a way of separating yourself from the norm. It's just as nonconformist as having very long hair. I'm a gay heavy metal slaphead. Deal with it. My other recent hair development is my big fuck off Gandalf beard. It wasn't a conscious choice, it was more that I couldn't be arsed shaving my goatee. So I stopped, and my beard went off on its own adventure. It's fair to say reaction on my social media has been mixed. Wow, Rob, that's the greatest beard I've ever seen. Fucking hell, Halford, you look like shit. And all points in between. I may keep it up or I may not. Who knows? Who cares? But I have to say one good thing about it is that I inherited my grandmother's jowls, and my bushy beard helps to conceal them. I mean, I love my nan to bits, but the last thing the metal god needs is his granny's jowls. Tattoos. For a lot of metalheads, tattoos are as much a part of their uniform as their battle vest and long hair. They regard getting inked up as a further sign of their identity and an individualistic statement, even surrounded by thousands of other people making the same statement. Tattoo culture goes back thousands of years, and yet, when I was a kid, hardly anybody had them. It was really only sailors who had often got them in the Pacific Islands and criminals. It was just those two fringes of society. Most people thought tats were common. It's only been in the last 30 or 40 years that tattooing has become a dominant global cultural force, and tattoo shops have sprung up in all corners of the globe. Today, tattoos are a fashion statement for young people, and there's a lot of peer pressure to get them. When it comes to music, tattoos are very much the province of metal and rock fans. You don't tend to get fans of Radiohead, Coldplay, or Sir Elton John swathed in them. There again, look at Ed Sheeran. He's covered in the buggers, and good for him. I always instinctively liked tattoos. The attraction for me initially was sexual. In my teens, I found and nicked a book of homoerotic photos by a famous US photographer, Bob Miser. His male models had tattoos, real ones, not fake ones, and they looked incredibly sexy. I thought about getting a tattoo for the longest time, but I never did until I was nearly 40. Some might say the classic midlife crisis age. I couldn't possibly comment. When I made my mind up to do it, I knew I wanted to go to a place that was well known and reputable. I wandered into a famous place in LA on Sunset Boulevard called Sunset Strip Tattoo. It used to be run by a guy called Cliff Raven. A lot of rock and metal guys used to go there. I mooched in on a quiet midweek afternoon, and Cliff Raven recognized me and greeted me. Hey Rob, are you thinking of getting some work done, man? I am, but I don't know where to start, I confessed. Well, let me help you. Tattooists have flashes, which are 8 by 10 inch cards with various tattoo ideas printed on them. Cliff pulled out literally hundreds of them for me to flip through, and as it happened, I did have one idea for what I wanted, and I spotted it pretty quickly. It was an image of a little devil standing holding a pitchfork. It was and is an iconic tattoo in gay underground culture. Whether you were out or not, having that tattoo told other gays that you were gay. And I had long thought that if I ever got a tattoo, that would be it. I want that one, I said. Cliff tattooed it on my bicep. It didn't take very long, didn't hurt too much, and it looked great. Thanks so much, I said, and I paid him at the end. You're welcome, said Cliff. I'll see you again very soon. No, I only want this one, I replied. You'll be back, smiled Cliff. He was right. I was back at Sunset Strip Tattoo within a week. Cliff knew I would return because he knew tattooing is an addiction. If you have an addictive personality, it gets under your skin and you dive right in. The second time I went, I got a large tattoo of a pitchfork on my shoulder, and then a personal tattooist fell into my lap. While I was away from Priest doing the fight band, J.J. Brown was my bassist. JJ is also a skilled tattoo artist, and before long, I was at his tattoo studio nearly every day. Tattooists charge at least $100 per hour, but as a mate, JJ did all of mine for nothing. I couldn't get enough. I was totally into it. I was JJ's canvas and he filled it up. Starting with my biceps and arms and then spread out to my front, back and legs. I would choose designs from his flashes and then we'd mix up the colours. JJ inked big dragons all over my back.
Dragons.
I've always been attracted to dragon imagery.
Yes.
It's fascinating how these mythical creatures exist in cultures all over the world, from King Arthur and Merlin to the Lord of the Rings to Japanese and Chinese mythology and folklore. I love my dragon tattoos, but that doesn't mean having them done wasn't bloody painful. It was a real challenge. Some days I'd be wincing in JJ's studio thinking, why the bloody hell am I doing this? We've been going for hours and it's not even half finished yet. Ouch, fuck. JJ didn't ink all of my tattoos. I had some done when I was living in San Diego and quite a few by a guy named Jim Watson, who was a very famous tattoo artist in Phoenix. I've no idea how many tattoos I have, but it's certainly more than 50. Two of my favourites are pain across my stomach and power across my lower back. They are two potent, explosive words, and there are good and bad definitions of both of them. To me, these two significant words sum up life, or a lot of it. I have an amusing penis butterfly tattooed on the back of one of my shoulders. It's a butterfly's wings attached to a body that is basically a penis, a shaft and a head. I call it the flying cock. I was in JJ's studio one day and spotted it on the wall. Hey JJ, I've got to get that, the flying cock. I had tattoos all over my body, but it was a psychological leap when I got one on my head. It was a totally impulsive decision. When Five were playing Sao Paulo, JJ introduced me to an incredible Brazilian tattoo artist, Junior, who tattooed a tribalistic bat on one side of my shaven head. Later, I got a tattoo of a lightning bolt on the other side of my head. This can be infuriating. There is an American football team named the Chargers. They used to be based in San Diego, but have now moved to Los Angeles, and their emblem is a lightning bolt. This can lead to me getting embroiled in a few predictable, repetitive, and slightly tedious conversations when I'm out and about. Hey dude, are you a Chargers fan? No? But you've got the Chargers badge on your head. No, I bloody haven't. My parents stayed quiet about my tattoos, but my mom was mortified when I had the ones on my buns. She never said anything to me, but I heard from my sister, Sue, that Mum had told her, oh, I wish our Rob hadn't had his head tattooed. I hope he doesn't get any more. Mum might have been right, because my head tattoos put paid to any chance of staying anonymous in public. Once I had a bat and a lightning bolt on my head, there was no mistaking me. Look, it's Rob Halford. If I'm out now, I always have to wear a baseball cap. For that reason, and one or two others, I've thought of having my head tattoos removed. That used to be a horribly painful business that left a nasty scar, but the lasers are so sophisticated now that it's a relatively simple process. Well, maybe I will, maybe I won't. We'll see. Over the years, I've met plenty of fans with priest tattoos. I've seen the Sad Wings of Destiny Angel, the Screaming for Vengeance Eagle, and the artwork from Painkiller. I've seen pitchforks, and even my Fizzog inked large on chests, backs, and arms. Some of the artistry is unbelievable. I'm always moved by gestures like that and very appreciative of them. It's unbelievable that people should love our band and our music so much that they want to ink it on their body forever. I guess it's just a more extreme, devoted example of sewing a badge on a battle vest. Tattoos have got much better over the years. The quality of the ink has greatly improved. You used to always have to go back to get tattoos touched up, but nowadays the ink is spot on and never loses its clarity. Some of my older tats aren't the force they were. My original little gay devil with his pitchfork is very faded now. Well, he is 30 years old. I have one on my arm and I can't for the life of me tell whether it says hardcore or forbidden. I had it done so long ago that I can't remember. After a few years of intensive, enthusiastic tattooing all over my body, I haven't had any work done for 20 years or more now. I find it hard to say why that is. My life just moved on. I still love the ones I've got, but will I ever get any more done? Well, never say never. Maybe I should get that tattooed somewhere. Body metal. Huge numbers of heavy metal devotees don't just listen to metal. They also scatter the element liberally among their everyday vestments. Even more impressively, the most devout and evangelical disciples even incorporate metal into their actual bodies. The metal world was, beyond question, the first music realm fully to embrace jewelry. It nurtured and developed the look of metal rings, chains, studs, and piercings, and then other forms of rock such as goth and emo followed in its wake. The classic metal jewelry that everyone knows features skulls, snakes, wolves, or devil insignias. Basically, anything to do with the dark side of mortality. Those symbols have a long historical place in our culture, ever since pirates flew skull and crossbone flags on their ships. I think it's fascinating that rock fans and metalheads utilize the imagery of death in this way. The skeleton rings basically say that we are just walking skeletons. Are we cheating mortality by flaunting this insignia? Is it a pushback against wanting to live forever? As a teenage music fan, I loved all the extravagant rings that Hendrix used to sport purely because they looked so cool. I wear rings and chains in everyday life, and always if I'm having photographs taken, for exactly the same reason, because it looks more interesting. When you take a photo, you want to engage the person who will look at it. If I didn't have my Judas Priest rings and crucifixes and spiked wristbands on, the photo would be more boring. I'm expected to look a certain way, and I'm happy to oblige because I love it. It's the same as when I first grew a goatee beard, and somebody asked me, "Why have you done that?" I said, "Because it makes my face more interesting." Likewise, why did I start wearing biker shades or leather caps? To liven things up. We're meant to be entertaining people. Most metal jewelry concerns itself with looking powerful, potent, and masculine. It tends to use alpha male type imagery. That doesn't mean that it can't be beautiful. Some specialists craft heavy metal jewelry from pure silver. It sells for hundreds of pounds and is worth it. I don't wear exclusively metal insignia. Living in Phoenix, I have some gorgeous turquoise jewelry that I bought from local Native American tribes in Arizona. I often wear it because, like the skull rings, it makes a lifestyle statement that I can embrace. I'd love to say that I also get all of my metal jewelry from such exotic sources, but I'm afraid most of it comes from China via Amazon Prime. Some days I have a ring on each finger and every one of them came by that route. All of modern life appears to be made in China. Every few months I go online, search out rings I don't have, and order them. I have hundreds in Phoenix and Walsall because I'm always giving them away to fans. It's never a premeditated thing. They'll just be chatting and I'll hand them a ring as a memento. I think it's fair to say that all through my life, I've always liked to go one step further. Wearing rings on your fingers is one thing, inserting metal into your body is a different matter entirely. When I was out of Priest, playing in fight and getting heavily tattooed, I also got into body piercing. It had intrigued me for a while. I felt that the connection between playing metal and putting it in your body needed to be properly investigated. My tattooist bassist JJ was also my portal into this world. He knew friends who ran a Phoenix body piercing company named HTC, and I went down with a couple of mates and had my nipples pierced. God, the pain was excruciating, but what a fucking power trip. It hurts to put nipple rings in, and it sure hurts to take them out. They had to be removed for my prostate cancer surgery in 2021, and they hadn't been taken out in 3 decades. The memory of 3 nurses with forceps and pliers struggling to extricate them at 6 a.m. still makes my eyes water. This is because your body is constantly striving to push piercings out, if it can. It sees them as foreign invasions into its tissue, although it will tolerate surgical steel a little more. I had to go see my current Phoenix piercer, Marilyn, to get my nipples pierced all over again. You're probably not surprised to learn that I indulged my penchant for going one step further by getting a Prince Albert in my dick. It's largely a sexual thing. Having it put in was as painful as you would expect, but probably not as bad as the nipples because it was over so quickly. The weird thing about body piercings is that you always want bigger jewelry. You want to go up to the next level, the next gauge of the piercing. Marilyn has done all sorts of size adjustments and stretches to my cock piercings since I had my Prince Albert put in. One occupational hazard of putting heavy metal in your body is going through airport X-ray body scanners. I regularly set the machines off. The security officers ask, "Have you got anything in your pocket, sir?" "No, it's body jewelry." "Oh, okay." They wave their wand over me and it bleeps around my nipples and my cock. Some guards knock me through at that point, but sometimes a buff security officer will ask me, "I'm just going to put the back of my hand against your body part for a second. Is that okay?" "It's fine by me, mate. Take more than a second if you want. Cop a good feel." Some metal fans take body piercing way further than me and become quite literally metalheads. I met one guy who had a flexible stainless steel ruler inserted into his scalp. How much must that have hurt? He waited for it to heal, then had 3 metal spikes screwed into it. There's also a famous guy, the Enigma, who used to be in the Jim Rose Circus and has toured with various metal bands. He is covered in exotic piercings, has coral implants in his skull to look like horns, and has had his eyes tattooed so that the whites are black. I'm not judgmental towards people like him. Why would I be? I've had enough piercings done myself. Just last year, I went to see Marilyn, my piercer in Phoenix, again, and got my septum pierced. Since then, I've been back to get the next gauge up. It really winds up some people. I read them online saying, "What the hell is wrong with you, Halford? You've got that stupid fucking beard, you've just had your septum pierced, and you're 70 years old. Just grow the fuck up." I think those overreactions are hilarious. Body piercing, like tattoos, is all about personal self-identity, self-empowerment, and expression. I've had my septum pierced at 70 because it is my body, my choice, my life. And I can't think of anything more heavy metal than that. The Book of Disciples. Metal and rock are righteous faiths. We priests and preachers in bands strive to compose psalms, testaments, and good old fire and brimstone sermons. Yet without willing disciples for us to deliver our scriptures to, they are just so many empty words. Let's put it this way, a church without a congregation is a mere shell. Everything we do, priest and any other band, is aimed at pleasing and satisfying our fans and enriching their lives. We practice our faith not just for ourselves, but for all of us. We preachers have all been disciples once. That is how we know the power of what we do. We could cannot do it without our true believers and disciples. They sustain us, and we hope that, on some deeply enjoyable but also profound level, we sustain them. Whether we are penning sacred texts in the studio or taking to the pulpit on our worldwide pilgrimages, priests do everything with our fans in mind. So, let's bow down and worship our disciples, because, in so many ways, they are the true metal gods. Fans. I've learned one thing in my 50 years in Judas Priest. It is that fans are everything. They commit themselves to you, and it is solely through that commitment, physical, emotional, and financial, that we are able to carry on making music and living the life we love. You have to understand the importance of your fans. You can never be dismissive towards them. They're your bread and butter when they buy your records, come to your shows, and buy your t-shirts. That brings an important responsibility to us to treat them well, to look after them. The crucial thing for a band to remember is that you don't just have a powerful relationship with an anonymous body called fans, but with each individual fan. Each fan has their own set of beliefs, perceptions, and ideas about you, formed by your music. You have to respect that. We understand because everybody in Priest has been a fan themselves. We still are. My first infatuation was with the Beatles. Yet, as much as I love their music, I think I was mostly drawn to John Lennon. The things he said, the way he spoke, and his fervent desire for world peace. In Priest's earliest days, we never thought of ourselves as having fans. That felt too presumptuous. We saw a few of the same faces when we went back to play pubs and working men's clubs again, but they never wanted more than a quick word at the end of the gig. That was a busting show, ta, glad you liked it, cheers. You start getting fans as such when you start releasing records. That's when people can take your music home with them and play it again and again. They can scrutinize your artwork, play your album before coming to your gig, and start forming a relationship with you. 50 years on, of course, things are very different. When priests turn up at shows now, there are always fans outside waiting for us. Some have been there since 9 in the morning. I don't tend to stop and talk to them because I am fully focused and preoccupied on the gig. After the show is easier. I'm more relaxed, and if there are fans waiting by the stage door, I'll stop and talk and do a few selfies if possible. It all depends on our schedule and when we have to be next, but we will do what we can. It's a very different thing to have chance encounters in the street. Fans are used to seeing you on the altar of the stage, dressed up to the nines and performing. When they bump into you out of the blue, mooching down the sidewalk in your cities, it can blow their minds. Particularly in America, some fans clock me in the street, rush up to me, and don't know what to say. They don't know how to deal with the moment. I can see their minds whirling. Oh my God, I've seen your show so many times, and I've got all your records at home, and your CDs in my car, and I wear your t-shirts. You've been part of my life for all of my adult existence, and I'm such a fan, and now you're here, right in front of me, now. It feels surreal to them to be suddenly in such close proximity to me. I've had fans break down in tears in front of me. They can't express how they feel, and they get tongue-tied. I don't know what to say, they often exclaim. I don't know where to start. I totally respect that process and how they are feeling. I mean, if I'd ever bumped into John Lennon in the aisles at Asda, I'd have been gobsmacked. I can imagine myself thinking, how do I tell this person what they mean to me, how much they've given me, the life lessons they've taught me? Of course, I'm not remotely comparing myself to John Lennon. I'm just saying that I understand why fans feel that way if Priest's music means a lot to them. I don't find those kinds of encounters to be embarrassing in any way. I think they're a beautiful thing. There's still a part of me buried deep in my consciousness that thinks, What are you so excited about meeting me for? A Burke from Walsall. But I subjugate that. I appreciate the emotional moment that person is having because I understand the nature of fandom. It's in all of us. You can meet super fans who know every nuance of every single record you've ever made. They'll ask things like, what did you mean by that line in the third verse of that B-side that you released on 7-inch in 1980? And I'll be going, sorry, which song was that again? One superfan is a cool American guy named Dave Hogue, who has at his fingertips every nugget about Priest you could ever hope for. Dave has been a huge help when it came to checking info for both this book and for Confess, and I'd sincerely like to thank him. Other fans will say, you saved my life when I was about to end it all. You gave me hope to carry on. Or, I made a big, life-changing decision thanks to your music. How do you react to that? Well, you respect what they're telling you. Show them the courtesy that they deserve. Inevitably, a very small minority of fans will pass a tipping point. They get so into the music and the band that their admiration topples into worship or obsession. That's when they can lose all perspective on the relationship and things start getting twisted. It has always crossed a line for me when fans hunt down my home address and send me things to sign. It's invading a space that I need to keep for myself. When I don't do it, they go online and slag me off. I read their posts and I just think, I didn't ask you to track down where I live and send me 10 CDs to sign. And in any case, even if I sign them, how am I supposed to get them back to you? Walk down to Walsall Post Office and stand in line. I've had fans turn up outside my home, both in Phoenix and Walsall. I see them on my security cameras. They just stand staring at the house or pose with the horns up. Or they leave notes in my mailbox. Rob, I'm not a stalker, but I was passing and hoped that you could say hi. The other week in Phoenix, a teenage girl turned up at the end of my drive for 3 days in a row. She just sat on a curbstone by my gate with her hood up like a brooding elf. I had to wait until she left before I could go out for a walk. When this happens, you have to be aware of the psychological depths of the situation that you are dealing with. You have to realize that it can be very dangerous, both for you and the fan. From Lennon to Dimebag Darrell, we've lost people in music that we should never have lost. Consciously or subconsciously, Priest are more aware than any other band of the tragedy that can ensue when fans' relationships to music go wrong. We witnessed it firsthand when those 2 young fans in Reno, James Vance and Raymond Belknap, went through their suicide pact. The following court case was incredibly disturbing for us, but probably the most upsetting aspect was that those 2 guys lived with Priest. They were in a dark place, but our music had helped to sustain them in their lives. Then we were falsely accused of telling them to end those lives. There is no upside to this sort of relationship between fans and band. It went so catastrophically wrong in this case, and ultimately, we had no control over it. It was all so far out of our arena. All we can say still is rest in peace. It's important to remember, though, that that tragic case and fans who cross the line in general are a tiny minority. For 99% of people, fandom is a positive, life-enhancing experience. Taking joy and inspiration from a band that you love is a wonderful process. As an impressionable adolescent, that was how it was for me with the Beatles and Hendrix. And if millions of fans have had a comparable relationship with Judas Priest over the years, I'm humbled and grateful, because it is a very precious thing. Autographs and selfies. It's human nature for fans who meet bands to want to take away a little piece of them, a souvenir of the encounter. Back in the mists of time, the traditional way for them to do this was to ask for an autograph. I've read about rock and pop stars who were so determined to get famous that they practiced signing their autograph before they even got well known. I never did anything like that, but starting to get asked for my autograph was an unexpectedly nice feeling. It's a sweet request, really, isn't it? Can I have your autograph, please? It may make no sense logically. Why do you want my name on a piece of paper? But a fan could take it home and look at it again and again. He signed that himself with his own hand right in front of me. I've got quite a flamboyant signature, and in the early days of Priest, I'd carefully write it as neatly as possible when requested. To James, with best wishes, Rob Halford. Half a century and tens of thousands of autographs later, I've curtailed my style somewhat. To speed things up, especially if there are scores of fans outside a hotel or venue wanting my signature, I just write RH. It's not just me. When I've seen footage of Lady Gaga emerge from a gig or film premiere and pass through a mob of fans, her pen briefly touching the hundreds of pieces of paper they're holding out, I think, yep, she'll just be writing LG. Priest's induction into the world of organised autograph signing came in the 80s when we started doing in-store record shop signing sessions. Fans would buy our albums and queue up for hours for a chance to say hi and get them
This is a
autographed.
hard job.
I love doing them from the off, as it was a great chance to meet fans in different cities.
Okay.
Plus, we sold a lot of records. My only grumble has always been that we have to sit behind a table to speed things up. I'd rather be closer to the fans and have more chance of a chin wag. We'd get asked to sign all sorts of weird shit at those sessions. I've always been a bit squeamish about signing body parts like arms, legs, or heads, but I'll generally do it. Sometimes the fan will go off and have an autograph turned into a tattoo, then put a video of it on YouTube. I thought we'd signed the lot. Records, CDs, photos, t-shirts, arms, tits, bums, bald heads. I thought I'd seen it all. I changed my mind in 1986 at a US Turbo signing session when a woman in her 20s plonked twin babies on the table. They were barely weeks old, days maybe. "Can you sign these, please?" she asked us. "What? Can you sign my babies?" Bloody hell. We had a quick band conflab. "I can't sign a baby," I muttered, aghast. That was our consensus view, so we politely demurred and signed the Babs blankets instead. Mommy seemed happy enough with that. Priests have been lucky over the years. We haven't had any Spinal Tap like in-stores where nobody turned up. That's just as well. If we ever did, and we had a hapless Artie Fufkin style record label rep who had organised it, I really would kick his ass. We don't do as many record store signings now. There aren't as many record stores, but our fans still love them. We did a big one at the Hard Rock Cafe in New York for Painkiller. We had an escort of bikers on Harleys and thousands of metalheads turned up. It was a cool day. I said earlier that being asked for your autograph is a sweet request. Well, I would now like to qualify that statement slightly. The request is notably less charming when it comes from a member of one particular bloody tribe, eBayers. You can always tell an eBayer they turn up at stage doors or outside tour hotels with not a handful but hundreds of photographs for you to sign, and you know that as soon as you've done it, they'll run off home and flog the lot on eBay. They're picky sods as well. Some of them have been pursuing me for years and know my autograph off by heart. I'll be quickly, grudgingly, whacking off a few RH signatures for them, and they'll say, "Can you do it properly, please?" "What? Can you do the full Rob Halford?" "No, I bloody can't." They get everywhere, and they always seem to know where we're going to be. When we started the 50 Heavy Metal Years tour in Pennsylvania in 2021, Thomas and I flew from Phoenix to Philadelphia to meet up with the rest of Priest. We got to Philly about 11 at night. The airport was almost deserted as we got the escalator out of baggage reclaim. And there they were, at the
Oh,
foot
I think
of the
it's done.
escalator, 6 eBayers, with not
Oops.
so much as one COVID mask between them, with their arms full of banned photos. To add insult to injury, as soon as I began signing stuff for them, one or two of them started taking photos and videos of me on their phones. They do that to prove that I really have signed the things that they're selling and they're not fakes. I don't always sign their contraband for them.
I did
It depends on
2
my
dragon
mood.
hoodies
When I
today.
do sign, Thomas rolls his eyes
And I
tells
will be
me
putting
I'm
these
a
in
fool
black
for doing
dye.
it, because I'm just making the
Okay,
eBay a problem
thank you
worse
for
for myself.
watching.
I have to admit, I think that he's probably right. Maybe I'll stop.
Thank you, bye.
Of course, apart from the mercenary eBayers, there are far fewer fans asking for autographs nowadays than they used to.